Public apology. Let's listen to that very quickly.
Plans are in full gear for the country to host the British royal family. The outward view of the country portrays a country of order and dignity, ready for our royal visitors.
Executive Director Davis.
However, the Kenya Human Rights Commission says not so fast. They want King Charles to issue a public apology over what the lobbyists term systematic atrocities, historic land injustices, and corporate-related violations involving the British government and British corporations.
We call upon the King on behalf of the British government and people to issue an unconditional and unequivocal public apology as opposed to the very cautious, self-preserving and protective statement of regrets for the brutal and inhuman treatments inflicted on the Kenyan citizen during the entire colonial period from 1895 to 1963 and thereafter to date.
The activists picking out excerpts of the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission report. The report recommended that the British government, the Kenyan President and Chief Justice offer public and unconditional apologies to the people of Kenya over the colonial and post-independence injustices, pointing out that President Uhuru Kenyatta made his apology during his annual State of the Nation speech on March 26, 2015, before a joint sitting of the National Assembly and Senate. King Charles III is facing calls to address the legacy of the British colonial rule, as well as complaints that foreigners still own large swaths of rich farmland in Kenya and that the United Kingdom has failed to accept responsibility for the crimes of British soldiers stationed in Kenya. A matter that has been a thorn in the flesh of many Kenyans and has also created political fodder in the past.
Africans were confined to unproductive and overcrowded native reserves. In some cases, British signed the so-called agreements with illiterate community leaders, leading to dispossession of their land. For instance, the Maasai community signed the Anglo-Maasai agreement that saw massive loss of their grazing land to white settlers. Unfortunately, some of the parcels of lands are still owned by British investors, as Lord Delamere, David Craig, and other corporations such as Kakuzi, Unilever Tea Kenya, James Finlay Kenya, and George Williamson.
This comes at a time when the United Kingdom and the royal family are under pressure to re-examine colonial history and apologize for its role in the transatlantic slave trade. During their visit, the King and Queen will meet President William Ruto and First Lady Rachel Ruto, as well as other members of government, UN staff, CEOs, faith leaders, youth, and Kenyan Marines training with UK Royal Marines. The King will also attend an event to celebrate the life and work of Nobel laureate, the late Professor Wangari Maathai, together with Wangare's daughter, Wajera Martha. Brian Mushiri, NTV, Nairobi.
And well, that's not the only statements that we did hear. We did hear from the Pokot community elders as well as the Kipsigis elders. Mike, if we can also just get a listen on some of those statements that were made, then we'll continue.
The elders led by Christopher Lonyala, who is the former Kapenguria mayor, say the British government, which colonized Kenya, should compensate the Pokot.
Watu karibu 2,000 waliwawa, wengine wakafungwa maisha, wengine wakatorokea Uganda, na ng'ombe karibu 10,000 kachukuliwa. Kwa hivyo hiyo ndio ilikuwa historical incident kwa Kenya colony tangu waanze 1920.
The elders also want the British government to address the Pokot Turkana Marakwet and Trans Nzoia border rows, which continues to bring conflict among the warring communities in the region.
Mimi napongeza president kwa usiku na mchana kulia Samoei mpaka hata kuweka university. Na sisi pia pandeu tunalia Lucas ambaye nataka hata mali waliuawa hiyo watu hata university fulani ijengwe. Ili wakumbuke hiyo watu.
William Lobetaku, a Pokot elder, said the communities in the region were marginalized, thus derailing development in the region due to lack of peaceful coexistence between the warring communities.
Mfalme kwa hamu aje arejeshe hiyo mipaka ya Pokot, kwa sababu sasa hii tunashira upande wa kaskazini, upande wa sisi na Turkana, na British ndio waliweka hiyo map. Ukoloni ilisha. Kwa hivyo kila mtu sasa anaheshimiwa na haki yake. Kwa hivyo Pokot naye wana haki ya kuheshimiwa, na lazima Pokot naye watii ile haki ambayo inafanyika.
Cases of historical injustices now manifest themselves in the form of squatters, absentee landlordism, land clashes, and lingering land claims. Zachary Nyakweba, NTV, Nairobi.
All right, well, that report by Zachary Nyakweba just sets the context for us, together with that story by Brian Mushiri as well, in terms of the demands by the Kenya Human Rights Commission. We'll be hearing from the Kipsigis elders in a moment, but we have to take a break. Very short one. We're going to be back, and we'll continue with this conversation, including, by the way, on the issue of the challenge, which is how the king will respond to the claims that the British troops in Kenya have continued to commit crimes here in the country, and of course how he will be addressing that particular matter. All right, let's take that break. We'll be back.
When you're finally released from pain, that moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
In a world that's constantly on the move, where every day counts, it's time to pause, reflect, and secure your tomorrow. It's more than just setting money aside. It's about building a foundation for your dreams. This Tuesday, in celebration of World Savings Day, NTV engages strategic partners, prominent experts, and a renowned moderator for a live panel discussion to dive deep into the world of savings in Kenya. Catch the discussion live on NTV and simultaneously stream on our social media platforms this Tuesday, 31st October from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. and find out why savings are important and get advice to help you make the most of your hard-earned money.
Visit nation.africa. To catch the best of lifestyle and entertainment. Keep an eye on education and gender issues. Get electrified with the latest sporting action. Stay informed as we unravel intriguing undercover investigative stories. And enjoy comprehensive coverage from award-winning journalism and reporting, including politics, expert opinion, and breaking news. Settle for more content in great packages on any device. Subscribe today for exclusive premium content. Visit nation.africa. Nation.africa. Positively empowering society.
Are you with me?
No. This is your war. Not mine. I don't want this anymore. You're on your own, Misha. Let me through. I need to speak to the one in charge.
In vain.
Victoria Remenivna, good day to you. Vika, I want to know what is going on here. I trusted your people with my child's health.
Yes.
Yes, and you have the police here? Inspections? My child might have a breakdown.
Win a 3-bedroom house in Nanyuki sitting on a quarter-acre or a 30K weekly shopping voucher or a monthly plot. For every 100K you spend buying or paying for your plot, you earn 1 entry to the draw. The more you invest, the more entries you get. Bamba Nyumba na AMG.
All holders are notified to report and surrender unclaimed financial assets to the Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority, UFAA, on or before November 1st, 2023. Visit www.ufaa.go.ke and get started.
All right, welcome back to the program. You are watching AM Live as we take a look at the royal visit, and this is by King Charles III and Queen Camilla, who have already arrived into the country just minutes past 11 p.m. on Monday. And of course, an itinerary has already been released in terms of where the royal family will be visiting. But just to finish up on some of the sentiments we were listening to, Kipsigis elders calling on the King and Queen Camilla to extend their visit also to Kericho County during their visit to Kenya this week, which starts today up until Friday. They say they're welcoming the King and the Queen to the country. And this is the elders under the umbrella of the Kipsigis Clan Association, comprising of 196 clans. We requested an audience with the royalty led by Joel Kimeto. The elders want the leaders to address the atrocities committed to them by the British colonial government that took over 80,000 hectares of their ancestral land.
Were oppressed by the British colonial government, and the British actually took our Kipsigis ancestral lands, I think, which has not been addressed up to date. And as Kipsigis community, we are kindly asking King Charles III to at least find time so as to speak with the Kipsigis community, who are the real owners of the soil.
We should actually remember the Kipsigis to come to Kericho and then say something about our ancestral land, that is Kipsigis land, which was grabbed by the colonial government.
We have actually been having series of meetings asking ourselves when these people are going to be compensated. Our forefathers were tortured, their properties were actually taken away. So we don't know when these people are going to compensate them. Quite a good number of them have breached this wall. So we heard that Prince Charles and Queen are there in Nairobi, and then thereafter they will be flying to Mombasa. So we wondered whether our leaders are very much aware that we have actually been having series of meetings here in Kericho. We thought that maybe they have been told to come and visit and see the suffering our people have encountered.
All right, Prof, I know you wanted to respond to some of the sentiments that are also made here in studio, but also in terms of, you know, moving forward, this issue of the past, the calls for compensation, the calls for reparations is something that cannot be brushed over in this particular visit.
Sign up. Dr. Wamai and I continued the discussion, and we have a lot of discussion beyond this. Right. And I want to make my point very clear. I'm not trusting Walter Rodney, nor am I trusting Masrui. What I'm saying is Kenya has been independent since 1963. Mm-hmm. We now have 5 presidents. Why have we not addressed this issue? Mm-hmm. Because the issue of Kenya is Kenya. The issue of UK is UK. UK was once a colony. We became independent in 1963. We took a different line, which was not grab the land, but buy it back. But once we buy it back, what happened? It's grabbed by our own people. So the people who were asking questions were about our land. Almost all lands in Kenya were taken by the British. Mm-hmm. But now what has happened to that? The one that we took back are now grabbed by our own local people. Zimbabwe grabbed the land from Ian Smith and the rest. And after that is a disaster. They took the land, gave to the people, without training, without anything. Men start marrying more women and settling on those lands. And the land become incountable. They're not producing anything. and there's a disaster. So we cannot continue the discussion of our own disaster, heaping it on the British. We need to be able to be accountable. We need to be able to do something about our people. That's the point where I'm coming from.
So are you saying our own government has failed us in terms
our own leadership has failed
fixing what happened during the colonial era?
Correct. Our own leadership has failed us because the UK Prime Minister does not wake up in the morning thinking about a child in Pokot who has not eaten. Joe Biden does not do that. Putin does not do that. Xi Jinping does not do that. It is our leader who must think about why kids in Pokot are going to school under the tree when we're talking about digital age. If we cannot dress it ourselves, don't heap that on the people so they will have a dream that when the king comes, everything will be all solved. That's my point.
Okay. Yes, I'll get to you, Dr. Njoki. Let me hear from Muliro, and especially, but I remember because Kenyans, I believe that was last year, if I can get that report, had actually filed a suit against the British government at the European Court of Human Rights, seeking investigation and eventual compensation for land they say was stolen during the colonial rule. Yes, Muliro.
Yes, actually, you've gone where I was going, and if I read, I listened and actually read, it was circulating on social media, the statement by Kenya Human Rights Commission. It was well researched. And they have touched on the, when you see them reading there, you don't see the power. But the power, if you read it, you'll see that there was a lot of research, and I hope that paper will reach the king who wants to understand the issues that are in the past and how to move forward. Remember that the royal, I think the United Kingdom, I'll be referring to it there, away from the British, is that they have been reluctant to offer an apology, and the ambassador talked about it. The Kenya Human Rights Commission and even the people you are seeing in the villages talking about these issues, they are very brilliant people there. For one reason, that once you give an apology, then you are opening the gates subsequently to legal battles that may have a domino effect in the entire former British Empire that they used to talk about. The entire, you know, all those colonies will now ask that you have accepted through an apology, can you now compensate? And I think the strategy of Britain is to keep it at that level of saying we regret and what, and allow those who are so committed to go through the difficult process that our veterans went through. You remember the Mwite case. And they were given a paltry, I think, slightly over 19 million pounds after, I think, the court ruled, because the government was unwilling. But one thing that is emerging, you see, those people about land, even as we say, that we are getting to 60 years since independence, what have we done? In my view, I always believe that the structure determines your future. And the colonialists laid a structure that we shall always remember, that it is the one that has marginalized, is the one that has made Africa remain in conflict and all those issues. We are struggling to unravel a problem, a mess that was brought to us, you know, without our invitation. So you look at that and you ask yourself in terms of humanity, why not leave the people the way you found them? So when you listen to even the Kenya Human Rights Commission and these people talking about come and see, there are structures, especially Kenya. I think Dr. Amaya was right, that the safe hands. You know, Kenya is like the laboratory or the picture of the residue of colonial experiments in this region. Even when you look at our cultural, I think the king will even reach somewhere and forget that he's away from Buckingham Palace when he looks at the way the police will receive him, and all those are British cultures. And you'll find that the land issue they are talking about we still retained a lot, you know, even with the struggles. We still have some laws that are colonial about land. These people, when they are saying that we want our land was taken, a Kenyan is still told that this land has a lease of 99 years. And therefore, and even the owner is not known, you know, absentee landlords. And the people remain on the fringes as squatters because the land is under Lord Delamere, even as the name suggests. And that's why I still go back to what I mentioned. If you want to see the land problem of colonialism, go to Central, and you'll see how conservancies are thriving in the midst of struggle over a quarter an acre of a huge family there.
I think also a big issue is also in Kericho as well, you know, where you have tea plantations.
Tea plantations, they are not
foreign corporations owning those tea plantations. And I think that's why some of those elders have been, you know, very vocal about this particular matter as well.
And Zainab, you're right. They're very intelligent. At shallow level, we may think they're just making the noise, but they know the structure, and they know that the government remains hamstrung because of that.
All right.
But just finally, to finish on this, what I do not, you know, something that has always made me agonize over this is the fact that, one, leave alone the borders between the African states, where we have always said that, why can't we have diplomatic negotiations and redraw them to suit our own interests? Why should we be always in London looking for the British maps and everything? So when I listen to that person in West Pokot saying that we need the royal to come and tell us where the map is between us and the Turkanas, that is something that I think we can just we don't. Those are some of the things that make me agonize.
So do you concur with Prof when he says perhaps then our own administrations have failed us?
Because it serves them. The colonial structures, yes, to some level, remember the exit agreements. Right. Whenever the colonialists were living, whether they were French or British, there was always an exit agreement. Okay. And that's why almost all the first heads of state, except a few, like Sankara and the rest who were killed, were actually installed by the exiting colonial powers. And they retained some of those structures that enabled them to retain and perpetuate their hold on power.
All right. Yes, let me hear from Dr. Omai as well, because I know you wanted to respond to that issue of... finally, right?
It's burning.
I know you wanted to respond when Prof said, you know, it is our own people who failed us.
Here because I don't know why. These men have been talking for so long.
I know, right? Yeah. But no, you have the opportunity now. Yeah. It is your turn.
So what do I talk about?
I mean, yes, so of course you want to respond to what the Prof said in terms of the fact that some of these issues, that it was our own, you know, governments that should have settled this particular matter, especially on the issue of the land ownership and injustices that we inherited from the colonial government.
I think there's a whole field of study called transitional justice. And transitional justice is about dealing with the past. And that's what I was telling Professor here. Here there are two different issues. And I think as much as every day we are talking about Kenyan politicians, governance, how we need to address governance issues, that's a different conversation. As much as there's a link between pre-colonial, or rather not pre-colonial, but colonial and post-colonial governments. And that's where I started, when I started this conversation, talking about why Jomo Kenyatta was chosen by the British. And right now there's a lot of research, even in the British archives, showing conversations of why for them it was very important somebody like Jomo, who had lived in Britain, who was not seen as very radical, who was seen as a safe pair of hands. You know what I called a safe pair of hands. Somebody who could agree. Can you imagine how crazy that is? Someone takes your land and then they give you a loan to buy back your land. You know, it is ridiculous when you think about it. Our land was taken, hundred thousands of acres, and then the World Bank gave us loans, and then to buy back. And then as Kenya, we bought back our land from the British with World Bank loans, which I'm sure we paid for a very, very long time in the post-colonial period. Can you imagine that? And then, of course, we know the problems of the post-colonial period. Jomo Kenyatta and his elites, the Angainis and others who were ministers of agriculture, did not give back that land to the people who were actually displaced. Like you all know about the story about Tigoni, which your journalist, historian here has been writing about, Tigoni, you know, and how those people are all moved to the Lari area and the Lari massacre. I mean, all that is also connected. And who went to live in Tigoni after that? So the original inhabitants of Tigoni are the people who are displaced to Lari, to the Rift Valley. So anyway, with that is, of course, you can see a leader who did not manage the post-colonial period, especially the land question in what I would call, I mean, did not really manage it well. And you can see the constant conflicts that we still have because of that question, the land question. So I agree, there's a connection between the colonial and the post-colonial period. But in this space where now the king is here, let us deal with now the king and where the king and Britain, of course, and the British Empire he represents, caused us damage, right? So that's why I'm saying, yes, it's all connected, but we must not forget. And if you look at all societies that refuse to deal with their past, whether it was caused by I don't know who or who, we have to always hold accountable. Accountability is very, very important. If you don't hold those people who have committed atrocities, even for you, if somebody has done something wrong to you and you just say, you know what, it's okay, I forget, and move on, it shall forever hurt you. You'll always be going back there and saying, no, why didn't we deal with, I mean, this happened to me. And that's where we are asking the British king and the family. I mean, I think this Prince Charles is more now it's King Charles, is more progressive than the mother. The mother, of course, was part of that colonial system. He's more progressive. I hope, and that's why I believe why he's also meeting some of these people who their empire, or rather the British colonial empire, caused damage. And also, it's time the Commonwealth, which I think is what he represents here. The Commonwealth needs to, beyond, say, giving scholarships, teacher education programs, the Commonwealth also needs to start dealing with reparations, historical injustices. And that, in fact, I recently, or rather a couple of months ago, I participated in a program about the Commonwealth, which the BBC was asking a conversation. Is the Commonwealth still relevant? Yes. And I was, a bunch of us from different countries were saying, on one hand, it's also waning, but it's also important for soft power of Britain because of, as Muliro was also saying, British power also is reducing. It's not like the empire. And I think also we need, I mean, when you think about Britain also, it was quite something, such a tiny little island that is only half the size of Kenya. Colonizing almost the entire world is also quite something. So, of course, it's waning, but it can become more relevant if it started dealing with the past, you know?
But by dealing with the past and calls for the apology specifically, I think Mulira touched a little bit on that, is that it is going to open Pandora's box.
Yes, and I think, you see, and that's the thing I'm saying, when we deal with transitional justice, there are 4 areas in transitional justice. And transitional justice deals with injustices committed in the past. And that's why even Kenya, after 2007 violence, we had to go through a period of self-reflection. And we went through, that's why we had a truth-telling commission. And transitional justice is done in various ways. One is truth-telling. The truth has to be established, a record of the truth. Today, if you go to Berlin or Germany, there's actually a museum of the truth. People come and say, I did this, I did that. Look at Rwanda, as much as there are challenges with authoritarianism, Rwanda in many ways has made progress because they started dealing with the past, with the Gacaca codes. So truth-telling is one of the ways we deal with the past. The second way is trials, where either we can go through justice, courts, the court system, or like in Kenya, you remember we went to The Hague, as much as it did not, it went the way it did. And the third way is memorialization. That's why we create what do you call it? memorial sites, like what we have there down the street at the bomb blasts. We have a memorial site so that we can say never again, to commemorate. So those kind of three, and also there's of course institutional reform and reparations. So compensation, so that you return people to the original place. And this is, I'm not saying it's the standard, but you can pick and choose how you deal with the past. If you don't deal with the past in any of these ways, or in other local ways that societies find important, these issues keep coming back.
They'll keep cropping up.
Keep coming back. And you will never then really move on as a society.
All right.
Yeah, so it's very, very important, because if you really want to set up your economy also on the path, on the right trajectory.
All right, Prof, yes.
We concur on a number of issues, as you hear it, Zainab. The issue for me is our leadership. Who replaces the British? Who has the large swamp of land? How did it happen? Why have we not addressed issues that people like Koigi Wamwere are talking about? That the Masrui and all others were raising. Why were we not able, up to now, to begin to have an impact on what's going on? Mao Zedong has spent 7 months at University of Pudong, had a revolution, cultural revolution. He wants to clear the people's mindset such that they can now spring into the new development. And people who disagree with him ran to Taiwan, and they set up their own territory. The other people purged, the other were killed. And then China, they now move on the trajectory which is developed by its own people. In 1989, it traveled through Africa, and East Africa was ready for revolution. It was not calling for us to start killing ourselves, but changing our mindset so that we can be able to set policies and procedures and structure, like Muliro was saying, that address our issue. We have not been able to do it till now. And so my point is, don't keep this all this issue on the king and have the king to apologize. And once the king apologized, like Muliro say, we opened Pandora's box. Every Kenya community land was taken.
But isn't that necessary,
Exactly. What's wrong with opening the Pandora's box? That's where we need to first open it so that we deal with the issues.
Every Kenya land was taken one way or another.
Yes.
They were not compensated. They either take it to build a stall or build infrastructure and all that. And so now you want to open that for us to go without our own leaders addressing the issue. That's my point.
Yes, yes, Muliro.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that when I mentioned that, I was looking from the perspective of the United Kingdom. Why they are avoiding the apology is because they believe once they do that, it will open other legal, and they have said that. I think the ambassador talked about that, that's their fear. But if you can allow me, Zainab, to mention just one thing that I agree. Actually, now that we should be able, my emphasis is what is in this for Kenya. How can we capitalize on this? And I think one of the things is what my sisters just touched, that maybe we narrow this and say, now that we know there are many things, but now that the king is here, we should be able to focus on his presence. We don't know whether there will be any other time the king will be around here for these locals to be able to project their grievances. So now that the king is here, we should be able to focus on how can we use his trip to this state to benefit ourselves. And one of them is actually that issue of once and for all healing the past, you know, the transition, even just listening. I know in the way I've observed Zainab, and I think my colleagues here, senior prof might add on that, I think the king, I may be proven wrong, the king may not apologize, because it has extreme economic aspects. He may just say he regrets, as they say, we acknowledge the suffering, but a formal,
which doesn't
serious
put him in a position that would then
commit the UK.
Commit and, you know, take accountability of some of these issues.
Yes, yes, and as it was mentioned earlier, maybe we may require that from the head of government. But remember, Kenya did that also again strategically. This thing has been planned for long. When the president, I think it was C.J. Mutunga, that did that first, you know, to apologize, to pave the way for the reparations and compensation. Then the President Uhuru did that, and then there was a little bit of reparations. But in terms of our strategy, I think in foreign policy and diplomacy, I would mention that President Ruto has an eye for opportunities in foreign policy. And if you look at the way it is choreographed, you can see where it begins and where it is going. That immediately seeing how many, you know, the king has not come because he decided. He was invited by the host state. That's what we are told. How many leaders went there and never thought about that opportunity of soft power? You know, use these massive cultural edifices of the UK and the world, as my sister was saying, you know, the presence of just Buckingham is an economic honor for those people in terms of tourism. So how do we use this? And you can see how it was choreographed. That the Attorney General and the Prime Cabinet Secretary on a tour about the railway system. And most of us were saying, do they need that? Maybe you Google. And then two, you see a few changes, and then now the Prime Cabinet Secretary is in charge of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And you move ahead and you see that he's actually the escort of honor. He received the king and everything. And behind that, you see the story of the Kenya Railway City. So it is not something in vanity. It's a chain of benefits. And therefore I say that why can't we, apart from the emphasis on heavy transition justice, as we say, we must have also homegrown aspects, as I say.
All right.
Why can't we be looking at Zainab mostly? Why can't we turn the light and see how do we exploit this? Because the king is traveling with a large battery of journalists, and it will be trending on international media and the rest. So Kenya's small, non-resource endowed state will be there in the limelight. How do we exploit that for the purposes of foreign policy?
Does it serve for the optics, or will it be something tangible on the ground as well, Muliro?
Optics are very important to lead to the tangible, actually. You cannot get the tangible if you are not known anywhere.
Okay. We'll take a break, but Dr. Omar, you wanted to respond very quickly?
Yeah. I just want to remind my colleague, Muliro, that also, you see, I like what you're saying, and I agree. We need to be very strategic. Ruto is very strategic in terms of foreign policy, very clever, and it was good he took the opportunity to invite the monarch. But the monarch also, remember, has quite a huge group of foreign policy advisors who are behind them, and they're only here also for their own interests. So the railway city is really here, is for them to benefit. Of course, Kenya will benefit with a new railway, but it's not for free. It's not a grant. Yeah, it is. I think, I don't know whether it's a PPE or it is not a grant. It's not. We are not getting anything that the king is coming to do here. It's not a free rider. So they are bringing their own investment. So for them, he's coming about with also business people. So he's also part of the capitalist, British or American capitalist interests, of course, couched in culture through the political, through the monarch. And we must not forget that. So it's not all goodies. In fact, we are getting very little. But if Kenya, and I hope the ministry, Foreign Affairs Ministry, and all these people are thinking through this, there's a way they could capitalize on this. Again, as I said, the British monarchy is waning. So it's not like also that it will receive so much attention in British newspapers about their visit, unless it's something that speaks to the white gaze of the British public. Like he has a nice photo with a lion or something in the savannah. Sadly, those are the things they care about. And you know, this king also is so into elephants and stuff like that. So there's also a challenge, because also the monarch's idea of Africa is still steeped in that out of Africa image, colonial gaze. And yet Africa is changing. And I'm happy that they have this matatu graffiti or whatever vans with them, because Africa is now a very young continent. There's very vibrant people. We have, I mean, this is the place where M-Pesa is thriving. You cannot send money on your phone in Britain.
Right.
So they should be, these are the things the king should be doing. You know, getting an M-Pesa SIM card, showing how he's transferring money, so that we can show that we can teach you, our colonial masters, a lot.
But it's exactly what Muliro is saying, sort of leveraging on this visit to showcase what Kenya offers.
Exactly, but sadly, you will see it's a lot of, even when the British media report, they will only like it when there is like the savannah and the elephants. So also the monarch. That's what would
sort of endear
and also
to the masses there.
Sadly, and also that's what, like Charles is, if you look at all the kind of sponsorship that the prince, he used to have a huge charity called the Prince Trust. Most of the money of the Prince Trust, and it's still there, outside Britain, goes into elephant conservation and animal conservation. So it tells you maybe also where his interests are.
Where the priorities lie.
Exactly.
All right, Prof, I know you really want to respond to that, but we have to take a break very quickly here on AM Live. Allow us to do that. When we come back, we'll just briefly touch on something also very important we've not been able to touch on, especially coming at a time when the king is coming, and there have been calls for response and address to what the British troops have done here in the country. Let's take that break. We'll be back.
Benefits of ordering with Glovo. Glovo allows you to order anything you want at the comfort and convenience of your home. Craving fried chicken or pilau or pizza? Easy and simple. Order on Glovo today. Glovo. Order anything, we deliver in minutes.
With Glovo, you've got the city at your fingertips. Unajisikia kukula kitu different? Order Glovo. Ama treat the family with a sweet surprise. Download Glovo and get anything you want in minutes.
People come to me and they say they get discomfort when they have ice cream. Can you imagine that? Avoiding having cold ice cream. Sensodyne gives you long-lasting protections against sensitivity. And people come in and they're like, oh, it works. I can have ice cream and I'm not in any discomfort. I recommend Sensodyne because it works. It's brilliant.
To get Moyo Wangu by Guardian Angel, dial *812 *799#.
Skiza na Nation.
Going back into European competition and into the Champions League no less was a long time coming for Newcastle fans. The chance of a run into and through the knockout stages might leave some of them feeling a little greedy. Except Newcastle has put itself in position to do just that, even after suffering a disappointing home loss. Being consistently competitive, beating the elite teams and rising to the top of the Champions League might be one of the hardest tasks in football. Now consider Newcastle's place in the Champions League. Returning after a gap of 21 years and drawn in Group F with PSG, Borussia Dortmund and AC Milan.
Win a 3-bedroom house in Nanyuki sitting on a 1/4 acre or a 30K weekly shopping voucher or a monthly plot. For every 100K you spend buying or paying for your plot, you earn 1 entry to the draw. The more you invest, the more entries you get. Bamba Nyumba na AMG.
This is NTV.
All right, welcome back to the program. You are watching AM Live this morning. We have just a small report here that was filed by Ngina Kirori, touching on something that has also come out from the presence of the British troops here in the country. And a woman in Samburu sat down to breastfeed her child. And in that intimate bonding moment with her baby, tragedy struck. A bomb went off. The bomb, believed to be an unexploded ordnance from the military activity, did not harm her baby, but almost cost a 7-year-old boy his hand. This is yet another incident in Samburu County where residents come into contact with the unexploded ordnance or bombs, leaving a trail of pain and death in some cases. In July this year, our reporter Ngina Kirori brought us a 3-part series, Camouflaged Crimes, highlighting the sufferings of people and communities in various counties on account of the activities of the British Army Training Unit in Kenya, Batuk. Well, in this small special report, she brings yet to the fore another incident along the same thread of tragedies. Let's have a quick look at that.
The rocks, dust and scattered vegetation form the canvas on which the realities of parts of Samburu County are painted. Areas whose locals, many of them nomads, spend their days with their grazing livestock. However, their lives can come to an abrupt end at any time or leave them bearing deep scars, visible and invisible, all as a result of unexpected explosions. I'm standing next to a live bomb. Hidden beneath the surface are unexploded ordnances or bombs, some of them dating back to 1939 when Italy clashed with Britain in the fight to control northern Kenya, while in other instances, these explosives that find their way into community land are what the British Army Training Unit Kenya Batuk and the Kenya Army use in their training activities. Both military teams have training bases in Samburu. In the special report, Camouflaged Crimes, we reveal the tragedy surrounding the situations of unexploded bombs, with cases dating back years. And in this report, we reveal how it is still taking place, this time leaving a woman and a child nursing severe injuries. 18th October 2023, Naishamunye area, Samburu County. Repela Lekeloi's face sadly tells just part of the trauma she's dealing with. She was sitting in her manyata, breastfeeding her child.
It was early morning. I remember because the goats had been taken for grazing. My baby started crying, so I picked him up. Just as I had started breastfeeding him, I had a loud explosion, which shook my whole house, and I fell down with my baby.
In what is a miracle in this tragedy, Repela's child was not injured. The little one was suckling on one side at the time of the explosion, and the metal piece hit Repela's other side of the chest. The feeding baby was centimeters away from a fatal hit. The sequence of events was traumatizing, Blood gushed out of the nurturing mother's breast as she wailed in pain, attracting the attention of neighbors who rushed to her rescue.
A county vehicle helped to transport me to a hospital at Archers, where I received first aid to control the bleeding before I was transferred to Galaxy Hospital in Isiolo. The doctor there performed minor surgery to remove a piece of metal which pierced my breast and lodged itself inside.
As Rapella recuperates at home, it is a mix of sad chapters to her tragic tale. First, she is still next to where the bomb exploded, in the environment of her traumatic experience. Then, at the time of the interview, days after her hospital visit, she had been unable to go back for another wound dressing, as directed in a doctor's report, due to the distance between where she and her family live and the main road linking Samburu to Isiolo, a distance of nearly 15 kilometers. Worse still, there is no reliable means of transport other than walking. She is stewing in the pain of the visible and invisible injury, pain and deterioration.
I want justice because I was injured, and my son could also have been seriously injured. On top of all that, I had to pay expensive hospital bills. I can now only breastfeed my child from one breast.
But a further sting to this situation is that the explosion did not only injure Rapella. 7-year-old Eric, who sits on his mother's lap, almost lost his hand due to the bomb explosion. His mother, Maris Lemeyop, speaks for him, saying the young boy has barely spoken since the incident.
My son had just come from taking our livestock to graze. When he reached the entrance of our manyatta, a loud explosion went off. I next saw my son on the ground wailing with blood pouring out of his hand. As we rushed to get him help, he fainted. I thought he was dead.
At the hospital, doctors considered amputating Eric's hand due to the severity of his wound. However, after seeing how he responded to treatment, they found that it could be salvaged.
I am filled with sadness, more so in the moment I saw my child badly injured. He is still traumatized to date. We as a family have also incurred a lot of costs for the treatment and the wound dressing, which he has been unable to go back for. We are considering selling some of our livestock to pay for the next round of treatment.
In view of the explosion, some mystery surrounds the incident in the residents' eyes. They say they have walked over the area where the bomb exploded a number of times without an ordnance going off. They add that the bomb was never visible to them, yet they have some knowledge on identifying the explosives, as it is a common occurrence here. They wonder how it found its way there.
The rain might be a blessing, but for a community in Samburu County, it brings together a bunch of problems because it uncovers a part of the past which they'd rather forget, because it brings in issues that maim their lives and change their futures.
The rain sometimes pushes these bombs which are hidden under the soil from the original place. The bomb that injured me looked very old, considering the pieces of metal that were spewed around after the explosion and the piece that pierced my breast. It isn't like the new-looking bombs which we encounter in our land, which are sometimes left behind after training exercises by Batuk and Kenya Army.
NTV reached out to the Kenya Defence Forces and the British High Commission concerning the incident. We sought to know if they are aware of the incident and the circumstances around it, and if any action has been taken from their end. Neither of the two have responded to our requests days later. In the search for greater clarity on what happened, NTV spoke to an individual who worked in one of the military training camps in Samburu area and was among those handling the clearing of the debris of fragments, explosives, among other items from training sites. We sought their insight on why the bomb could have gone undiscovered for so long. Upon their request to conceal their identity, we shall use the name James.
Sisi kwa tunafanya hiyo kazi, tulifanya hiyo kazi kwa miaka 9. Kila area tunakilia. Kila mahali yote ambaye either ni ya Kenyami au British tunakilia yote. Tunahakikisha kuna kitu tunawasha. Kwa sisi tuliwasha kazi exercise ya British Army au ya Kenyami ijasimama, bado inaendelea tu na bado tu wanaendelea kuweka. Unaona? Hata ingawaje siku hizi unasikia wanaandika watu wakwenda kuokota, but hawafanyi vile sisi tulikuwa tunafanya. Wanaenda tu kwa wiki 3 wanatoka. Baada ya miaka mmoja wanakuja tu wiki 3 wanatoka.
I want justice because I was injured and my child could have also been seriously injured. On top of all that, I had to pay expensive hospital bills. I can now only breastfeed my child from one breast because the other is damaged and in a lot of pain. We have heard of many bombs that have exploded in nearby villages.
And for some of the victims, the thought of moving to safer grounds has crossed their minds, except that this is the only place they have to call home.
I love this place because it is my home, but if I had the means, I would move from here.
Lisoka Lesasuyan was maimed by a bomb belonging to the British Army Training Unit, Kenya. Gabriel Lengishili, also maimed by a British Army bomb. Noel Mureithi was also maimed and died as a result of a bomb explosion in his home. These are the faces that manifest the fragile line between life and death for many residents who explain living here as sitting on a landmine, some boxed in by their circumstances with no other place to go.
Watu wanaumia huko mbaya sana. Unaona? Watu wanaumia huko na bado ni hatari kuishi pale. Na hakuna mahali nyingine wataenda, wataishi pale tu. Naona hii yote kuna life, kuna maisha ambayo inaendelea pale kama maisha watu wanaishi msituni na wanyama. Kwa sababu saa hii kama ingekuwa ndovu iliwao pale, KWS ungetua pale na helicopter. Si ndio? Hebu angalia watu wameumia pale. Hakuna mtu anashughulika.
Samburu is not the only county that has incidents of unrest over the consequences of army units training near their homes. In Laikipia County, the 10,000 acres of land destroyed by a fire started by British troops in March 2021 continues to flare up anger amongst community members who say their health and livelihoods were affected as a result of the fire. Despite the courts directing compensation payouts to the residents for the damage suffered, the locals say Batoke is yet to effect the directives of the order.
Kama wanataka kuendelea na mazoezi, kwanza wahakikisha wameweza kupeana compensation, lolaiga pale ile fence ambayo wameweka wakamilishe, na kama ni kutrain waache kutrain kwa vichaka.
One man, Linus Murangiri, died after the vehicle rushing to put the fire out ran over him. The complicated history between the United Kingdom and Kenya, its former colony, has presented a myriad of reactions from the public. Ahead of the King Charles III's official visit to Kenya, he is set to land in Nairobi on the 31st of October in his first visit to a Commonwealth nation while on the throne. Many are calling on him to dig into the soil of historical issues which have seen the local communities harmed in the hands of the British and continue to do so to date, and sow the seeds of justice. The Mau Mau remnants and families. The Nandi County demanding the return of Koitalel Arap Samoei's skull and compensation. The Loldaiga fire of 2021. The pain of deaths and injuries caused by unexploded ordnances or bombs going off and spelling havoc on people and communities.
Hata mimi nashindwa. Sijui tufanya nini. Hapa sijui ni bahari ya kukaa. Hapa ni mahali pengine huko. Sijui
The murder of Agnes Wanjiru by a British soldier, which has made no progress over a decade later, and sits under a morbid and unsettling cloud of cover-ups and justice delayed, which by the legal maxim is justice denied, and hence injustice.
It is very traumatizing because the prime suspect is still walking free in England.
The king will be landing in Kenya amid the cries of victims of camouflaged crimes. Mgena Kirori, NTV.
All right, so it was important for us to give you that special report just to set context into some of those issues that the king is perhaps expected to address as well. You have the murder of Agnes Wanjiru 10 years down the line unresolved. You have the issue of the unexploded ordinances where we've seen the impact of that as well. And of course, the criticism that the British troops in Kenya have committed in the past and made away with them, including, issues of rape that there have been, there have been allegations on the same in terms as well as issues of environmental degradation. So, Prof, do you expect the king to be able to sort of address this particular matter, because it's a question that communities continue to query every single day, that, communities have been impacted by this?
Sign up. I'm expecting the king to take the upper level. And not get into the technicality of what's going on. Because all the military training and strategy require safe handling of ordinances, and spent ordinances included. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, unless you are in a war zone situation where that does not happen immediately. The training of the British and Kenya, overall value is that the Kenyans are getting better trained. They're getting better exposed to the latest technology, and that overall we are better off in terms of the arrangement and relationship. So what does the contract say about unspent ordinance? Recovery of the ordinance. That is the issue that Kenya need to address, because Samburu is a very active place. I've been there with the military. It's a very active place. And so if it's a very active place, it displaces the community. There are incidents after incidents of people losing their limbs and all that. Why is that not prioritized in our strategy, in our training? Why is it not prioritized by the county and the national government?
But who left this, unexploded ordinances? It is the activity by the military, the British troops.
So I'm
Shouldn't they
going back to what arrangement were made.
Right.
What was signed by who? And why is it persistent? Why is it happening without addressing the issue? That's the point.
I think I would say, I would agree with you. First of all, the Kenyan government, especially on what has been happening in Samburu, the Kenyan government there is really culpable, because all they needed to do is end or even suspend these military relationships. Or agreement. Because if they did that and they tell the British, look, you either, because they have the technology, you either come and clean all the landmines before we, or we have a new agreement where we or maybe, just give people space. Because nobody's life is worth training. I don't know whether you get what I'm saying. Nobody should die because we are training British, we are training anybody.
Right.
That shouldn't be. And so for me, there are two things that we need to deal with here. One, the king, I think, has, and thank you so much, Ngenda Kirori. That's a really sad but very well-researched report. All those atrocities that Ngenda has rightly put, I think the least that the king would do, as much as my colleagues are saying it's a Pandora's box, is to acknowledge all these issues, apologize, probably meet all these communities, and put certain things that there are things that can easily be done through the Commonwealth, for instance. The Commonwealth is good for scholarships. It gives lots of scholarships for people to go to Britain or even here in the country. Provide scholarships, provide opportunities for development of the communities that are all affected by British atrocities, whether it's in the past, so the Mau Mau, the Talai, the Koitalel, the Pokot, all these groups, and the present. The present, there is where now we look at the Kenyan government and ask them, are you really for us, or who are you fighting? Who are you? Are you really there to care about the Kenyan people. The issue of the, what's her name, Wanjiru?
Agnes Wanjiru.
Agnes Wanjiru. That should have been already dealt with by the Kenyan government, telling the British, if you're even telling the king, if you're going to come to Kenya during the invitation, please come and deal, also say something about these things. Of course, he will not deal with them, it's the government, but as a show of a good gesture, he can actually acknowledge and then talk to Rishi Sunak and say, look, we need to, it's not going to be business as usual.
Right.
If we are serious about Britain's soft power, we need to change our foreign policy. We need to be seen to be more humane or addressing the past, especially with the communities, I mean with the countries that we formerly colonized. That way, even the Commonwealth will be relevant, the king will be relevant, but if he's not addressing the past or dealing with any of those issues, like I'm saying, I'm suggesting, say through scholarships or acknowledging, I mean it just becomes just a foreign group coming to look for their own interest and enjoy the animals.
Yes, Muliro.
Yes, I think when I was looking at this video, I even saw I followed earlier the documentary itself.
Right.
Is very painful, and I agree that this was well researched. But two things come. You know, when you look at that, you see the undertones and its marks of the colonial negligence and thinking that the black life is less. You can see that negligence. If that would have happened to their ilk, even just the negligence that you have left something in a community and can explode, the uproar will be higher. But my biggest fear is that, you know, when I compare this with the colonial, the agitation by the communities about land and the rest, these are very different perspectives. The effect of Batuk and the past colonial, I'm seeing them in a different perspective. The past colonial we may think of, as Njoki is saying, Commonwealth, which is a very decent way, issues of charitable organizations in communities that suffered. But on this one, I see it more criminal, and we are almost, as she even mentioned, we are almost putting human life on the table and saying, you can do anything with it, but then ask for compensation. I don't think we should be even prioritizing compensation in these cases where that woman was just breastfeeding and then there's an explosion coming out of negligence. I think, you know, the training of Batuk is one of what I mentioned earlier, the post-colonial agreements. This was a post-colonial defense agreement, and Prof here understands that more. That when the British were leaving, they said one of the exit strategy was that you will allow us to be training in this terrain in Kenya twice a month or a year, something like that. But my question is that, have we, again, the government of Kenya, have we gone back and looked at that agreement and found ways of safeguarding? Because I'm looking at this not in terms of the end point of compensation, but what can we put in terms of sanctioning to make sure that even our own laws force this agreement or the training of the British people to follow certain standard operating procedures when they're doing that within the communities. Because remember, they even use phosphorus that we have heard about in Israel and Gaza Strip, and it burned the entire, 7,000 homes. Even if it is a thatched houses in a community where we come from, we say, even if somebody covers himself with dry leaves, you don't burn them and say they are cheap. That is his homestead. And these communities are still crying and asking for compensation. So it looks like these activities by the British training unit in Kenya is taken lightly. They say, okay, you can be negligent, people can be killed, but then you will compensate them. It is our government to put measures through legal procedures and everything to cover this. I think there are extreme benefits to some level, as people are saying, for us to be able to terminate this defense pact. There's a lot of joint training, intelligence, counter-terrorism, We are not an island in the international system. We must work with others. So international relations for developing states like us, you accept to some level, you know that the powers might be exploiting, but also you must know what is in for you. So it is give and take.
Mm-hmm.
So, but where?
At what cost?
Where?
At what costs, you see?
There are costs in international relations. You know, as a developing state, you cannot just, even I remember my sister was saying that, you know, they have come with their own interests, and why in Kenya, you know, every state pursues its own interests. Mm-hmm. So they bring their interests, organize yourself, and also within that interest, as they do that, get your own interests. Even as the US claims it is helping us to fight terrorism, they have their own interests. So I'm looking at that and saying that I even saw, I think it is in one of the papers, although I do not very much support the idea, where the person is saying that there was a company called Montex Textile, it died, and the economy of the people there was in shutters. But then when the Batuk came in, the training unit, the border people, there is activity, there is business around there. But as she says, at what cost? But it is the government to mitigate those areas of the cost. So for me, as a final statement, these two issues. The other one, we can talk about compensation and look, because it is in the past. This ongoing looks more of criminal negligence, looking at the aspect that those rural lives do not matter. After all, we will pay them. Where is our government when all this is happening? It requires NTV to come out and document. Who will have even known that you are just somewhere in a Manyata? You know, you look at the Manyata and you compare with this building and you say, even if the forest, 10,000 acres burned, and those houses are burned, we will pay them something small. I think on that part, our government must review the post-colonial defense agreement.
And review of that, I mean, defense agreement. I do know that in April this year, we had our members of parliament that voted for that amendment that said it is not going to be possible for UK soldiers to be tried for grave offences committed against Kenyans here in Kenya. Before that, the treaty said they would only be tried somewhere else. Does that make a difference? Is that going to change perhaps the situation in terms of accountability? I'll come to you, Prof. Let's just take a quick break. When we come back, we'll wind up on that conversation as our panelists also give their final remarks, and we'll be back. Stay with us. AM Live NTV is the hashtag we're using.
So fresh, fresh, fresh. Fresh all day. Always fresh. Nivea Fresh Deo. Now with new InfiniFresh technology. Antibacterial power with 48-hour protection and long-lasting freshness. Nivea Fresh Deo. Feel fresh in every moment. Try new Nivea Fresh Sensation Deo. Our freshest fragrance with 72-hour antiperspirant protection.
Candace, what's that?
I brought you a small bonus.
Bonus for what?
You got us 299 family dinners, 64 kisses on the cheek, 12 road trips to see grandma, 42 jokes from daddy, 49 laughs from mommy.
In over 60 years of dealing with numbers, we've learned that the numbers that matter the most to you are the ones that matter the most to us. NCBA Bank. Go for it.
Patata.
How you like me now?
soldiers are notified to report and surrender unclaimed financial assets to the Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority, UFAA, on or before November 1st, 2023. Visit www.ufaa.go.ke and get started.
All right, welcome back to the program. You're watching AM Live this morning as we wind up on the final stretch of this conversation. Professor Noah Midamba, I mean, you wanted to make a point in terms of the issue of accountability by the British troops. And before we went on a break, I did mention the issue of this new amendment in Kenya that now makes it possible for UK soldiers here in the country to be tried for what is termed as grave offences committed against Kenyans in Kenya. That was different before this particular amendment. Would that perhaps change, even the perception within which we safeguard, our people in terms of this military agreement that we have with the British?
Militaries are disciplined people. Mm-hmm. They're also guided under very structured, very disciplined law.
Right.
One, you don't just expand ordinance and leave them like that. They are to be collected, safely accountable, everywhere in the world. That's what guide the training that is done. It is important, Zainab, it is important that Kenya amend the original law of continued British practices in the country. And that include the trial and imprisonment of anybody who violate the law while you are in Kenya. And so that law is important. But the next step, the issue, that Samburu people know that they have a law that guide them. The Kenyan people aware that this has been done. So it is one thing changing the law. It's another thing informing the people so they're informed about it. Now, everywhere around the world where there is a military establishment, there are consequences. There are consequences surrounding those establishments. Are people warned, particularly young women, are they warned? Is there procedure under which they understand the implication of hanging around those kind of establishment? So Njoki disappeared, Wanjiko say disappeared. Up to now, people don't know. The question is what happened? Were the families aware of the rules and procedures that need to happen when a young girl hung around those kind of establishment? This is well known all over the world. And so Kenya must be very vigilant that every Kenya life matters. You see, this cannot happen in the UK because every life in the UK matters. And so every Kenyan henceforth has to be clear that it matters. So international law, procedures, how we work with the partnership has got to be clearly spelled. Another point I want to bring up is, yes, there is huge benefit for the king coming to Kenya now. The son sat on the British Empire, which was not expected. British was #1 economy in the world and the most powerful in the 19th century, the most powerful. It is no more. The other countries like China, even India, has now gone ahead of British to where we are. And British will always hang around with America, like Siamese twins, like I said. You touch British, you touch America. You touch America, you touch British. This is what is going to happen. So that's where the power lies. What is going to happen is the British interest is to revive the Commonwealth, all the remnants of Commonwealth, so that there is thinking, there is cultural exchanges, there is trade and development taking place actively. There is a combined effort to think uniformly when you come to United Nations votes and all that. That is not happening. And I think the king, and I don't want to speak for him, in his private mind, feel like if I'm visible, I'm out there, Kenya and Malaysia will get along, and Kenya and India may vote together. And so other Commonwealth countries, like Zambia and Nigeria, they're all looking at what role is the king going to play in Kenya, and how will Kenya benefit? Those are the questions that are being raised. The people in England are looking at that. Okay, the king is going to, our trade with Kenya is this level. Is this going to promote our trade and development in the future? So it's a reciprocal relationship that the public are looking at. That's where we need to be.
All right. And Muliro, you know, interestingly, as we talk about the issue of Commonwealth, still on the Standard on that particular story that we were on, it says the Commonwealth that is largely overseen by the monarchy is also just a club whose influence is also minimal, except in a handful of countries where the head of the monarchy still acts as head of state, right? And then you have, for example, Jamaica, which wants to remove the king as a head of state. Interestingly, as you know, now, you know, the king visits Kenya, and what that's, you know, how that is symbolic to the rest of the Commonwealth nations as well.
I think at the back of the mind, and my colleague mentioned, the British people still have that hump on their moral governance, that they have a monarch. And there's a very progressive world of democracy and liberty for people to ascend to leadership. But they have been reforming the monarchs. You know, we have very few absolute monarchs. I think it's only Swaziland, but then, and a few. But they say it is a constitutional monarch where they have now the prime minister running and, you know, doing all those liberal aspects. The Commonwealth, Zainab, just like we can say BRICS, you know, G20, G7, global powers have found ways of creating blocks or caucuses to project their foreign policy. And the Commonwealth has gone further beyond the forum, and it has engaged in many aspects of public and cultural diplomacy. You know, the Commonwealth scholarships. You know that the Commonwealth has been a forum for discussion that has brought together, even it was a forum that really helped states like India, like Nigeria to champion the aspects of non-alignment. So Commonwealth still, as Prof has mentioned, it's a forum that needs reform but should not be altogether abandoned. You know, you can easily say that it is a club, but what do clubs do? They bring together the interests of members and project them. And therefore you find, if you look at the history of India's foreign policy and rise, India actually capitalized on the Commonwealth. Nigeria has given leadership of the executive sector for many periods. So Kenya is also, if you look at the character, I think it was mentioned earlier, President Ruto is, we discussed this some time back here, that as he tries to introduce himself in international relations, because initially he is not one who had those international networks. He has been more of a Kenyan politician. He's doing that with an eye on doing what the Nigerians did, that how can I project myself and Kenya as a champion of African affairs, Pan-Africanism. And every forum, including the visit of the king and the Commonwealth, provides that avenue for the soft power image projecting. And therefore, it's my view that, just to move and digress from your question, it's my view that maybe perhaps, as we think of how do we compensate, because I think if we individualize, then it is going to be more commercial. We know even aspects of where compensations, including the same places like Kipia Samburu. So compensation comes and the head of the household vanishes with that, and it breaks even families. Maybe we think of sustainable ways of reparations. The investments, like the British training group, Patuk, has been saying, they do a lot of corporate social responsibility, building schools, hospitals, and opening roads. So the king must also now rise up to respectively, you know, not make Kenyans who have suffered look like beggars looking for only payment to repair their history of suffering. We must find a way of sustainability. And this is one of them, is the education development through the Commonwealth, as we have said, the scholarship.
Right.
Then we can have targeted charity organizations, you know, charitable programs within the communities that suffered more of these operations. The Mau Mau families, some of them are living in abject poverty. Some areas still are not accessible. Some areas that were marginalized because of colonialism, maybe they should have that targeted way of sustainable improvement of the welfare of the people who suffered this form of previous colonial. In fact, those who were directly assaulted and harmed are no longer, maybe most of them are not there. We are just looking this in terms of transition justice, the psyche of the community, the society that suffered. The UN has that agreement or provision on how to deal with long-time communities that suffered some forms of grave violations by others. In fact, that documentary you are showing, it just reminded me the old story that human beings have suffered more in the hands of fellow human beings than in the hands of natural calamities. So you look at that and you ask yourself, why should another human being cross the seas from an island, come to another area where there are other human beings and lord over them, exploit them, kill them, rape their women? Or why should another human being come and misuse the hospitality of a community like in Samburu and say, okay, we know it is a difficult, rugged area, but this is our home. We know how to survive. You can train here for your own benefit to improve, because they don't have that terrain there. The young people who are training in here, then you exploit that hospitality of the people because you have some pounds, and you look at them in terms of they'll accept compensation. So my baseline is that this story of compensation must now move forward to another level. It should not be that level of now again another form of commercial begging cap in the hand, that you can do anything with me, provided I lose my limb, please I'll bring my hands. And we have those stories on the ground, that the compensation is very big. You know, and so the government of Kenya must come in with this trip of the king. As I said earlier, we do not know when he'll ever be back. And in diplomacy, we say it is always better when you have face-to-face negotiations with a person at the summit level, high-level position. So this is the time for the government to milk the UK through the visit of the king by first expressing those burning issues from the past and having a strategy to move forward in the future.
All right. Dr. Omai, as you make your final remarks as well, leveraging on this particular visit by King Charles III, how can Kenya sort of strategically position itself in ensuring that we get a better deal, we get a good deal out of this?
I think, as we said, Ruto seems to be quite clever on his foreign policy. So I believe even by inviting the king here is part of that strategically positioning Kenya as an important player within the Commonwealth. For some time, actually, Rwanda, which was never in the Commonwealth, had become a very important player, and hosting, probably after this you'll hear Kenya is hosting CHOGM, is it the annual or biannual meetings of the Commonwealth? So maybe one of the things is Kenya could host the Commonwealth heads of state meeting, bid to do that or something, or I don't know how the process they go through that. that can really be a boost to the economy, conferences and that kind of thing. Of course, the second thing, beyond trying to become an important player within the Commonwealth, as we say, the Commonwealth is also waning, but how can Kenya strategically place itself, is also using our history as the British colonialism was the worst in Kenya, in Africa. The worst, most violent, that is, most violent, most atrocities, most deaths were committed in Kenya.
Right.
And another country is Malay. I think it's Malaysia now, or Malay in Asia. So Malay and Kenya had the worst experiences, of course, of colonialism and the detention centers and the torture that went through that. So it would be really sad if we don't use this opportunity as what looks like good friendship between the current government and the monarch to actually encourage them to apologize, and not just apologize, have a proper program for reparations, proper program for restitution. I just came from Lubumbashi at the African Studies Association of Africa, and our conference theme was about restitution, restitution of Africa. Right now there's a lot of movement, or there's a lot of Western countries returning the things they stole, actually, not for lack of a better word, they stole, or they took away.
They
so
stole.
Yeah, and like now, so beyond, like now in Kenya, we need restitution of Koitalel Arab Samoei's head, skull,
Right.
you know, back to his restful place or rightful place. So restitution is a conversation that is not going on, not just among academics like us who met in DRC Congo to talk about restitution, but also among ordinary people. Look at the Koitalel, the Nandi, they're asking. So Kenya can become a leader, almost advising the Commonwealth and the British King, that this being the place where the worst forms of colonial atrocities were committed on the continent, let us also be the leaders in reimagining or redesigning a better, of encouraging Britain to do the right thing now. And it starts with Kenya. So returning Koitalel Arab Samoei's head, not just returning it, supporting the university. I think there's a Koitalel Arab Samoei University. Britain can do good in putting a lot of money in that university. It's still at its nascent stage in developing that university, giving scholarships there, even in the university. And once somebody probably is done with the undergraduate, they get a Commonwealth scholarship to Britain. History, investing in history. History departments are almost dead because of, what happened with the 844 system. So Britain can do well in investing in all history departments, not just money for research, money for scholarships again, so that we can bring back history.
So reparations would entail this sort of a general, response to addressing this issue. It is not just monetary compensation as many would expect.
Reparations are different forms.
Right.
They are different forms. We have symbolic reparations. Symbolic reparations is like what is where you give, like, say, money to a university, Koitalel Arab Samoei University, or Kimathi University. So there is symbolic reparations, and then there is individual reparations. Like, for instance, I think the British, the King is going to meet Kimathi's family. Maybe provide compensation for all these groups, but also tell us, make sure the British colonial government knows where they buried Kimathi, just like Mukame would have wanted to know before she died. So that is something I think the King can go and sit with Rishi Sunak or whoever who and decide we need to deal with these issues. So for me, if the monarch wants to continue being relevant, not just in Africa, but in all other places they colonize people, they cannot run away from the issue of dealing with the past. And then after we deal with the past, we can continue trying to be good friends. But without that, we will still be in this kind of fake relationship where, they want to see our animals or to be nice to the elephants, and for us, we want their money to build the railway. So But that is not a relationship based on an authentic, or we have to heal because we want to heal. This was our colonial master. It doesn't still have to be a painful relationship.
Right.
We can always, because in restitution we say there are 5 things. There's restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and then never again, and then compensation. So those 5 things must happen for us to really move on and have a sustainable relationship.
All right. And Prof, you have the last word now as we wind up.
Thank you, Sen. I'm really happy that we're ending with what I call way forward. Way forward for the British, way forward for Kenya. There is, just look at the king coming here. The king has been advised by a lot of people in a very structured way. They have listened to what Kenyans need, and then they have taken that in consideration in the context of their overall international policy, which include the Commonwealth of Nations and all that. The most important thing is, as you can see, Kenyans were not prepared for the visit, and in terms of what do we expect. The Kenya, we expect money. You know, he's bringing money for us. If he doesn't bring money for us, then that's not good enough. So, as Muliru said, the president was not the foreign policy in terms of his background, but he's picking up where President Uhuru left in his second term, which got very active on international and regional issues. And because of that, he has a very strong background on businesses. And that lies the strength of what we can do. The British need to invest in Kenya. For instance, Unilevers need to come back in a big way in Kenya. The Bigelows does not need to manufacture from London. They need to have a manufacturing plant in Kenya. Kenya has done very well with value added on what called black tea. I think we are past China right now in terms of the world supplier of value added black tea. But we can do better. And it is manufacturing that's going to move us from a lower middle class to the middle class in the future. And so we have a reciprocal relationship with the British in a very substantive way, where they're moving their plants here. That's going to encourage Americans to do the same thing, and Canadians to do the same thing. So this visit is important. It is important for our local people and the expectation in the future. It is important for the British and what they expect in terms of reciprocal relationship within the Commonwealth framework. If it goes well for everyone.
Right.
If it goes badly, it is for everyone.
Yes,
just one word. He has reminded me one thing, that actually the king's visit, he's not just visiting Kenya. He's sitting in Kenya to address Africa and the Commonwealth on the new foreign policy of the UK.
Right.
So we should see it in that way, that this is a place, not just Kenya, but now from Kenya he is able to project his message to Africa and the Commonwealth.
So that's interesting. It speaks a lot about, where Kenya stands, even in terms of democracy of, African nations as well. All right. I think it's a great time to wind up on this conversation, the symbolism of the visit. And of course, we've also done a re-examination of the history of colonialism a little bit. We'll continue with that conversation. It's a wall-to-wall coverage after the break. And of course, we'll be having, some conversation with our reporters also covering the King Charles III visit here in the country together with Queen Camilla, and of course the itinerary that has also been released. We'll be giving you once again a brief of that itinerary. But thank you, Dr. Njoki Wamai, Professor Nomi Damba, and Dr. Nasongo Mulero for joining us this morning to have this conversation. And of course, we'll continue to see the, what will come out of this particular visit. Perhaps we can revisit this next week after this visit and see where we have been and some of the things that will come out of it. But thank you for coming in this morning. This is where we take a short break, but stay with me. We'll be still here in studio to continue with this conversation. The hashtag is AM Live NTV, and also the Royal Visit NTV at NTV Kenya at Zainab Ismail. Let's take a break. I'm going to be back.